What is the main takeaway of all that we just heard from the league in this memo?
And Malika, there are very few issues the league owners are as sensitive about is the idea of performing those services under a contract, that a player, wherever he is, making any suggestion or his agent making any suggestion that he would give less than his best based on a trade happening or a trade not happening. That's what this memo was about. That's what this, I think, admonition of Aaron Goodwin, Damian Lillard from the league was focused on. Simply the idea that you can't say that publicly and you can't say that to teams. Don't trade for my client. He's not going to play hard for you, or he's not going to show up. Certainly, that was at the crux of this. It was not about trade request itself. Remember, the team gave a statement shortly after Damian Lillard's trade request, acknowledged that he had asked for a trade. That's why Lillard's agent and Lillard didn't get fined for talking publicly about wanting to only play in Miami.
Tim?
Yeah, I think to Adrian's point, this is not about the trade request. It's about the overall perception of a player saying, I'm only going to play for one team, and I'm only going to position myself to play for one team, and I'm not going to perform the services up to my contract somewhere else. If you go back to 2019 when Anthony Davis got fined $50,000 for a public trade request, that was a similar situation in the sense that you had Rich Paul and Anthony Davis trying to direct AD to wind up with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, in that situation, AD got to where he wanted to go, and maybe in this scenario we'll see Damian Lillard eventually wind up with the Miami Heat, the place he would clearly like to be. But this is about the perception of players needing to play to their contract.
Yeah.
And if they have to show up and play in training camp or get traded to another team, they have to show up and perform. And they can't say, hey, I'm going to sit at home, not play, and you're going to have to just deal with the ramifications of that. The NBA absolutely does not want that. And that was why they went through all of this and why they sent that memo to the 30 teams on Friday.
Yeah, Tim, you bring up the Anthony Davis example. I think back, okay, Boston maybe would have been interested in that scenario, but it was very clear there was only one destination that Anthony had in mind, and that was the Los Angeles Lakers. So, Woj, I guess that begs the question. Now it is July 31st. It was a month ago on July 1st that we heard Damian Lillard say for the very first time that he officially wants a trade, and there is a one team that he has in mind, the Miami Heat. So now, 30 days later, where does this entire saga stand?
Malika, but at one point, and you just mentioned it, the Anthony Davis situation when he was leaving New Orleans, when he had asked out, he essentially, the threat that he was able to give to teams, including Boston, was, I'll come play for you, I'll play hard, but I'm going to leave in free agency. The Lakers will have the cap space, and I'm going to leave. Lillard doesn't have that leverage because he has 4 years, over $175 million left on his contract. And that's part of what I think is holding up the trade market. That's part of why there is perhaps not the feeding frenzy people thought there might be for a Damian Lillard trade. It is not because teams think that if we traded for Damian Lillard, he wouldn't play hard for us. He'd be too unhappy here. It wouldn't make for a good enough environment for us to take him on. That has not been the issue with teams. It has simply been the idea, I think for a lot of teams, his age and the idea of paying him over $60 million at 35 and 36 years old, the last 2 years of his deal. So certainly Miami remains a team, I think, most motivated, that has enough assets to eventually perhaps outbid the market. The problem is, listen, Portland looks at what Miami has, doesn't love it, and keeps hoping something better is going to come along. It may or may not, I think, but certainly you get into the dog days of summer. As July turns to August, lots of GMs, team presidents, owners who are involved in these conversations, they're going on vacation. Teams aren't engaged. There are no deadlines looming, and that certainly has slowed up this process. Miami's not going to bid against itself and keep upping its offer when it doesn't think Portland necessarily has anything comparable. That's why this is dragging out and why it may continue to drag out. The next real deadline is the start of training camp in late September. That's certainly going to be a moment of truth for the Portland organization. Do they want to bring Lillard back into camp with all of this swirling around, or do they at that point take the best offer they can get out there. Do they take it into the season? But right now, there's just not been a lot of engagement among teams on a Lillard trade.
Yeah, absolutely. And as all of us know, sometimes you go on vacation, you get a little sun, you come back feeling a little different, a smile on your face, and maybe that's when we'll see a deal made. Woj, Tim Bontemps, thank you so very much. Will this message from the league have an impact, do you think, on players moving forward?
Absolutely. And we have to blame what happened in the past for as, James Harden, the Ben Simmons situation, the Anthony Davis situation, even Kevin Durant and Kyrie situation. Those are part of the problem of why we're here today. And this is just the start of what's to come. It was to the point where it was a players' league. Players were kind of had somewhat control as far as, dictating on where they wanted to play. That's coming to an end. And I think with the NBA and Adam Silver, setting these rules and putting this in place right now, talking about actions will be taking place for us, with the Damian Lillard situation, is more to come in the near future. And so now, you obviously, owners and everybody around the league, they're looking to clean up what's been a mess over the last 5 years for as players' empowerment.
Whether we like it or not, right, it feels like there's a precedent that has been set here, Brian. And I know we just talked a little bit about some of the differences, right, between an Anthony Davis, between a Kevin Durant, time left on contracts, ages, that sort of thing. But when you look at this memo specifically, Brian, what's your biggest takeaway here?
I think the league is trying to win a public relations battle here. I think the only way that anything would ever change on this front would be as if they blocked a trade. If the league came in and said, well, you can't go to Miami. You can go to the other 29 teams or 28 teams. You can't go to Miami, Dame Lillard. Otherwise, I think it's the league trying to manage a situation here, which has developed over the last few years as players have stopped becoming free agents. They've changed the contract rules to the point where it highly incentivizes players to take extensions. They are taking those extensions and then just forcing their way out via trade. And not only just doing that, they're trying to actually conduct free agency while in a contract by forcing their way to a certain extent. Malika, if this was a humongous concern for the league, they would have addressed it in the collective bargaining agreement that just got signed a couple of weeks ago. They didn't. And so, therefore, they are now trying to manage it afterwards. And so, trade demands have been technically banned for decades. You are technically not allowed to have that to happen. We heard Bontemps mention that Anthony Davis got fined for one a couple of years ago. Have we seen the abatement of any trade demands? No, they come out and they get public very, very quickly. So I understand why the league's doing it. I don't think it's going to materially change anything. The tampering rules, they started slapping teams' wrists for tampering over the last few years and issuing penalties for tampering. So now teams still tamper, but then they just announce it a few days after July 1st so that they don't get investigated. It really hasn't changed the actual tampering.
But I got to be honest, when I saw this, my first reaction was, oh, wow, this is a real investigation, and everybody got put through the ringer. I've changed ever since I've been making calls. I really think if this was something serious, they would have fined him. I mean, if there was something big here, there would have been a fine immediately. I mean, this is just a don't do this anymore, hey, make this look good kind of statement that was issued by the league. And, look, nobody wants to go through this, but, Perk, you mentioned James Harden, Ben Simmons, all the other high-profile stories that we've had in this vein the last few years. Damian Lillard is not the guy you make an example of. I mean, Damian Lillard's been loyal this whole time. James Harden's asked for 3 trades. Okay, Damian Lillard sat back and been loyal for a long time, and I think this has gotten to be a toxic situation. And as Woj mentioned, the reason why this is difficult is because he has so long on his contract. He has so much money due to him, his age, the length on his contract. It's a difficult contract to move, but this is not the guy that they want to make the poster child for asking for a trade in the wrong way.
And this is very different. Go ahead, Perk. Go ahead.
But Malika, Ramona, Wendy, let me ask y'all this. If you're the league and you're Adam Silver, don't you have to start somewhere? And I understand they haven't fully been, addressing this problem, but don't they have to start somewhere? I feel like this is a starting point
but Brian,
to make an example.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember necessarily Damian Lillard, and obviously, yes, we've seen different things reported, including by us, but I don't remember Damian Lillard specifically saying I'm not going to play. Like, it's hard to picture Damian Lillard being the guy who is not going to play. From everything that we've heard from him actually not showing up. And we've talked about it as potentially being even more of a Kevin Durant situation where he said, this is what I'd like. Sean Mark said, we don't really have the option. Kevin Durant said, okay. And then he came back and said, once again, all right, actually, no, this still really isn't working for me.
But Dame has not spoken publicly, okay? And I know he's got a big event coming up in a couple of weeks in Phoenix. It's a camp. So it'd be interesting. I think the next leverage point is actually when Dame speaks publicly.
Sure.
We know from this statement he's not going to go too far, okay?
Yep.
But what is his messaging here? How does he portray this? Is there a path where he does go to Portland and report for camp, and then that puts the onus back on them to decide, do we want him in camp after everything that's happened? And so
Absolutely.
I do think there are some leverage points before we get to training camp.
We're going to have a little bit more time, Brian, to talk about this later, but last word on this for now.
I think there's a difference, as you mentioned, between saying I want to play for Miami and I won't play for anybody else.
Yeah.
I think the want to play for Miami is clear. I think that's something we know is true.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.